Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, falling at the finish line. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed more than 200 bills as the clock ran out on this year's session, but did her 30-plus vetoes steal the spotlight? Plus,
I know how we need to collaborate together as a community to change the crime situation in Albuquerque, so I'm all in.
New year, new district attorney. Bernalillo County's Sam Bregman tells us how he plans to address crime here in Albuquerque. Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. A new federal report shows Indigenous mothers and infants are dying at a much higher rate than non-Hispanic white women. In less than 15 minutes, New Mexico in Focus correspondent Antonia Gonzalez sits down with two people who dug into that disparity and asks what could turn it around. The New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department is overwhelmed with troubled teens. In just over 25 minutes, our Line Opinion panelists discuss why police officers are starting to speak up about CYFD and the broken foster care system that has them responding to mental health calls time and time again. But first, we head one last time this legislative year to Santa Fe as we parse through the bills the governor signed and the ones she vetoed. Let's get to the line. Welcome to our Line Opinion panelists for the week. We're happy to be joined in person in our Albuquerque studios by Tom Garrity. He's founder and president of the Garrity Group Public Relations. Giovanna Rossi is here. She is president of Collective Action Strategies. And our friend Michael Bird, a longtime public health consultant, is with us as well. Now, we start this week at the governor's desk, where 245 bills finished their 60-day trip through the Roundhouse. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed more than 200 of those bills by the April 7th deadline. And she took the veto pen to 35 and stuck another 21 in a drawer with her pocket veto power. Now, she did sign that massive tax package that included $500 rebates, a child tax credit expansion, and reductions in gross receipts for healthcare providers, but the governor scalpeled out GRT cuts for other businesses. That's a big one right there. She axed the first alcohol tax increase in 30 years, another biggie, and denied changes to the state's personal income tax system that would have helped low-income New Mexicans. Now, the governor has received plenty of criticism over those line item vetoes. And Giovanna, I want to start here, including fellow Democrat and U.S. Senator Martin Heinrich, whose 3 tweets were highly critical. Giovanna, I'm curious, were those criticisms warranted? I mean, he was reflecting others, not just him with these criticisms, but a U.S. Senator. That's very interesting to me. Was that warranted in your view?
Well, I think that there have been a lot of criticisms, and Senator Heinrich is one of them, apparently now. I think it's okay to voice his opinion. I mean, everybody's got an opinion, right? Like, why not share it?
But isn't there a line to these things? You stay in your Senate lane, you stay in your gubernatorial lane, you know what I mean? You don't cross over, especially in the same party. Criticizing someone from your same party, that's a tough one.
Right. Well, there might be some other information there about why.
True.
He might be talking to environmental groups. They might be encouraging him. I mean, who knows? Lots of things go on that we don't know about.
Right.
But I think, to look at it in perspective, there were a lot of bills that she did sign, and so we're very focused on all of these vetoes and everything that she didn't sign. But I think looking at it as a whole is also helpful.
Interesting, Tom. Just to finish the Heinrich bit, he did one of his 3 tweets. Quote: "I'm disappointed to see many of those efforts now vetoed." Speaking about bold action to deliver for our state, tough stuff there. The proposed alcohol tax increase I mentioned in the setup shrank throughout the session. It started at 25 cents a drink before, getting down to a tax bill just a couple of pennies. The governor chopped that tiny bump out of the tax package. How did you take that when you heard about that?
Well, I took that as the power of lobbyists.
Okay.
Lobbyists aren't, it's not a bad word or anything like that. Lobbyists have tremendous influence, and perhaps that's what came into play on that particular issue. If I could very briefly go back to Senator Heinrich.
Absolutely.
He is not the first sitting senator who has tipped the scales or has put his fingers on the scales with regards to different issues.
Okay.
Senator Domenici was also very well known, but it is very uncommon because you have others who have been in that particular seat who have done all their stuff behind the scenes. it doesn't mean, I mean, it's a big tent is what they say. And so, and Senator Heinrich is definitely his own person. And so I think he's pretty much true to his brand.
Right.
As far as saying he's independent, you want to know where he stands, just ask him.
There you go.
And if you don't, then he'll tell you.
That's right.
So,
Well, he has an
which I think is really good.
Yeah.
He has an interest clearly in stating his position, and that's what he's doing. And that's
Yeah, and it's always in a good and respectful way, which I appreciate.
Another, Michael Byrd, another issue that met the slash was the tax for electric vehicles. Very interesting thing there. We're talking about an electric vehicle tax credit, I should say. She was more concerned with continuing oil and gas profits here, some people are accusing her of, than she is of meeting her own climate change goals. That's a tough way to look at where the governor's been over the last 5 years, but suddenly here we are with this kind of a thing.
We also have had one of the worst fires that's related to climate that took place in northern New Mexico.
That's right.
And that would seem to me to be a message to not just the governor, but to everyone here in New Mexico as to the impact of climate change on New Mexico.
That's right.
Plus, your own PBS station has been chronicling the issue of drought, an ongoing condition over the years now. So it escapes me to see that in fact the governor did not take some action on these environmental proposals and was not supportive of them.
I don't know if this makes a difference, Giovanna, but New Mexico has more than doubled its oil production in less than 5 years. And I go back to what I'm reading a lot online, that folks are very frustrated with this governor who are in the environment business, feeling like she's, kowtowing to the oil and gas industry. Is that a fair accusation at this point, given what we've seen here for these vetoes?
I mean, Tom mentioned that lobbyists have a lot of power in Santa Fe. I will say that it's curious.
Yeah.
And she just went last fall to the Egypt, climate conference. She did some executive orders of her own, naming 2 cabinet secretaries to chair a task force on environment. There's no question that how she feels about climate change. It's not like she doesn't believe in it or something. Right. Like some people, a vocal minority of the population. But it is curious. It almost seems like what was passed was not what she wanted.
Right.
But she has made efforts to put this task force together, to put her 2 secretaries of energy and minerals and the environment department together to do this task force. I don't know what the outcome of that task force has been, but
well, I'll remind everybody, the state's Clean Future Act of 2022 set a goal for the state to reach 50% emissions reductions by 2030 and net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, Tom Garrity. I ask again, is this furthering to that goal? Something seems to be a bit of a meander than a straight line towards that.
Yeah, and the question you pose is fun to contemplate because it would appear that Democrats are all against that there hasn't been more done for the environment.
Right.
When in actuality there already has been a lot done already. Energy Transition Act is really that foundational piece. But sometimes it being a big tent, as we were talking about earlier, is I think that the progressives are probably very upset that they didn't get everything that they wanted. I mean, they have Democrats controlling the House, the Senate, and the 4th floor. Why shouldn't they get everything they want? And I think when we saw what was transpiring in the discussion on House Bill 547, which was the tax package, that we saw we saw a lot of Democrats who were saying, you know what? This package is just too big, not the least of which is John Bingaman and former Senator John Arthur Smith. Both Democrats, both have served the government and in different ways, and they brought up some great points in advance of the governor's veto. So I think that what we're seeing as far as the outlet, the people kind of pounding their fists, they just wanted everything, and I think that's why we have a veto pen. I mean, there was a lot of stuff in that tax package advantage that I would have liked to have seen as well. I would have liked to have seen more of reorganization of the tax structure.
Right.
That was thrown out.
That's right.
I would like to see more support for small businesses. That really wasn't included either. So there's just a lot of stuff, but you got to give and take, and that's why we all have a say in the governmental process.
Please.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Getting back to the alcohol tax.
Oh, yeah.
New Mexico has an alcohol problem and has for historically. And as someone who comes from a family that was impacted by alcohol abuse, I'm well aware of the fact that the populations and the communities that it impacts are American Indian, Hispanic population, and the poor.
That's right.
And it ripples across the system. It's responsible for alcohol. Alcohol abuse. There are all kinds of health issues. It's responsible for drunken driving. It's responsible for the families breaking up.
That's right.
It's responsible for many of children who have to go into the system, children, youth, and family systems, and foster care, and the impact that alcohol has on New Mexico and New Mexico citizens is really,
That's right.
I think, if criminal if we do not respond to it in an appropriate way, and by not putting some resources into it, not investing more in prevention programs. All of these things ripple across our systems.
That's right.
And to not address this ensures the fact that this issue will continue to cause problems for everyone.
Yeah. I'm sorry, do you have a point on that, Giovanna, please?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to follow up because,
Please.
you have a public health background. Alcohol abuse is a public health problem. And I think that is clear, and then it's sort of like, okay, what's the solution? And maybe the governor, it wasn't enough. Maybe it was too much. It wasn't clear which side she was.
If she had said something that we could have some clarity on that.
Well, the only thing we heard was that the numbers weren't quite right. At least that was what was quoted in the paper.
But it also takes, I need to move on, unfortunately, but it also takes $10 million off the table with these couple of pennies on each drink that was going to go towards what Michael just mentioned, help for families, abatement issues, all that kind of thing. That's not there now. I'm not quite sure where the governor's coming from, how you can make that up as opposed to what was laid in front of you. You don't want to do 25 cents a drink, that's fine, but 2 cents? Can't even do 2 cents? I mean, something weird there. All right, thanks to our line opinion panel on that one. We'll meet back here at the table in less than 15 to talk about an investigation from Searchlight New Mexico and ProPublica that reveals the state's failures in caring for foster children in need of mental health care in our state. A new report spotlights some of the federal government's shortcomings when it comes to Indigenous health care, specifically for mothers and newborns. A Health and Human Services Advisory Committee spent 24 months reviewing data and literature, and here's what it found. Maternal mortality among American Indians and Alaska Natives ranges from 2 to 4.5 times the rate for non-Hispanic white women. In some regions, the disparity is even more striking. Indigenous mothers' mortality rate is 7 times higher, and the data showed an estimated 93% of those deaths among Indigenous people are preventable. Now, with Indigenous people making up more than 10% of New Mexico's population, those stats hit our state harder than most. So to understand what's required to turn those numbers around, New Mexico in Focus correspondent Antonia Gonzalez spoke with the chair of that advisory committee and an Indigenous nurse midwife who helped put that report together.
Welcome, Dr. Edward Ellinger, Chair of the Advisory Committee on Infant and Maternal Mortality and co-author of the report. We're also joined by Dr. Janelle Palacios, a nurse and midwife, Chair of the committee's Health Equity Group, and she's Salish and Kootenai. Thank you both for joining me. And this report is extensive. One thing that stands out is the amount of historical context used to frame the findings. Dr. Ellinger, why is it important to have a firm understanding of the centuries of hardships facing Indigenous people before considering this specific problem?
We know that belonging is an important indicator of health, being part of a community, being welcomed in a community, being appreciated in the community. And we know that for so long, American Indians and Alaska Natives, Indigenous folks in this country have not felt included. In fact, they felt excluded. And that has impacted the policies that we've created in our society and their sense of whether they even belong in this country, even though this was their country to start with. And it has a huge impact on their health. So it determines all of the federal policies, local policies, and it impacts health directly. That's why we really focused on that context, because that's probably the most important thing that has affected American Indian, Alaska Native health over the last 200-300 years in this country.
And Dr. Palacios, anything to add to that about why it's so important to talk about the historical context before addressing certain health issues, especially when it comes to this one?
Yes, of course. We are a country that has a lot of stereotypes. And so for the longest time, someone's personal outcomes, their health outcomes, so for example, someone who went into preterm labor or someone who may have had extra bleeding after delivery, or someone's use of substances or mental health issues were all put on their own shoulders. It was their own burden. It was their own fault. And if we don't have the historical piece, that context to help us understand that systematic policies actually targeted Indigenous peoples of this nation to disenfranchise them from their families, to break down strong cultural practices and beliefs, to replace them with other ones that made them feel less than, then we have a difficult time understanding why there are such issues like mental health or self-medication through substances, or why people experience higher rates of systemic racism in the form of higher rates of incarceration or imprisonment. So it's really, really important for everyone in our nation to really understand our nation's history. I know when I went to school, I did not know very much about Native American history. It was just a few pages in the book, and we learned about Sacagawea and Pocahontas. And our history is so much more than those two figures.
And much of the report is framed around equity, and that includes data collection. And we know not just this issue, but many issues across Indian country and Alaska Natives, there's not a lot of data. So Dr. Palacios, how did blind spots in the data impact your ability to properly look and analyze this issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love this question because we typically are an asterisk nation. If you look at state reports or national data, the American Indian Alaska Native population is usually an asterisk. There is not sufficient numbers. We're not counted. We don't matter. And there's a whole issue about how to count us, which is a whole other conversation, because we're talking about, do we count those that are enrolled only? Do we count those that are just receiving Indian Health Services? Do we count those that self-identify? And to that point, we have to understand part of our nation's histories and policy was to systematically terminate Native people as a people, so that they would no longer have claims to these lands and resources. And this was pointed out in Chief John Marshall of Supreme Court, where he talked about that the future that he saw was that we would be one group of people. There would no longer be Native tribes, that we would all be, there would be no need to settle disputes among Native reservations or Native people. And American Indian Alaska Native people tend to be a population that has intermarried, intermixed with a lot of others. So the first step is trying to identify best ideas of how to count Native people so that we can get to that information.
Dr. Palacios, there is a lot of mistrust still in tribal communities across the country. So how important is it to have these meetings and hear from different Indigenous communities to start building that trust?
Right. So the fact that the committee actually had an in-person meeting on tribal lands was just demonstrating that your community matters, right? That we are here. And the HRSA, Maternal Child Health Bureau, they moved mountains in order to make this happen. You know, the first time in 30 plus years that a meeting was outside of Rockville, Maryland. So they really worked for a good amount of time, I think close to a year, to make this happen. And when we were in the committee and we had people testify and give their testimonial of like their experiences in addition to the data that they were presenting, we heard that they recognize the importance of having space to share their stories. So we have communities that are accustomed to, unfortunately, a style of presence that is just very short term, a short span of time. And it takes that continued engagement, that continued presence and participation in the community for communities to feel safe, that they can trust you. So this is a first step. It's a great first step, but then action needs to follow this. Not just listening to voices, but then taking action, because our communities know what's needed.
Let me add to that. The fact that Janelle was on the committee as an Indigenous person, that allowed people to feel a little safer. And also by the fact that Deb Haaland is a federal appointee from the American Indian Alaska Native community at the federal level. They're starting to say, maybe we're being heard. Maybe we can put a toe in the water and be a little bit more trusting, always cautious, but it's a gradual process. It's not going to change overnight, but just having representation. That's why one of the things, the whole area of the recommendations are, we need more Indigenous people on committees, in task forces, on workforces, in the workforce in general, so that they feel included, they get a sense of belonging and feel part of the community, and that helps build that trust that we're looking for.
And also, Dr. Palacios, you also had a personal side to this report. You talked about your own childhood experiences and patterns. How does that cycle of abuse and trauma impact health outcomes for Indigenous mothers and infants? Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. At a young age, I experienced growing up as the firstborn of a teen mother, and she herself, my mother, was a child of a teen mother. So we have generations of teen parents in our families, but we also lived on a reservation. We lived on the Flathead Indian Reservation. We lived in HUD housing. We ate commodity foods. I remember going once a month to go get commodity food. So I remember poverty. I also remember racism, because my reservation has a heavily non-Native people population that own land in most of the towns, and we have an agricultural space. So growing up at the intersection of poverty, of racism, of being Native American and a woman, and having this historical piece of generations of teen mothers, and experiencing firsthand violence, abuse, just different things that come with this historical trauma. As a teenager, I saw my friends also experiencing these similar effects of historical trauma. And at a very young age, I realized that I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to become a midwife and help people and help families. So as I was talking earlier, that the way that many people in our nation historically have looked at, let's say, teen mothers in general, that it's their own fault for becoming pregnant and having a child, as if they were pursuing that. It really takes out that consideration and understanding of there are limited opportunities sometimes for people, that not everyone has the same opportunity because of their launch in life. Then you'll have a better understanding of their health outcomes, their behaviors and practices. And I was able to bring this onto a national level, which I'm very honored to have been able to do that for. So if we're able to understand as a nation and look at our own history, our nation's history, we're able to better help all families in our nation to be more of a community.
So how do we talk about these things without promoting stereotypes or expressing stereotypes?
Something that Dr. Ellinger and I and Dr. Magda Peck have really tried to work at is changing the narrative. So if you have to understand that historical piece, and you have to let people share their experiences, and then with awareness of people's experiences, that we can reintroduce new stories so that we can combat those stereotypes. So that's one way that we're trying to really battle against these stereotypes. Another one is that hard data that a lot of scientists and a lot of policies are made from. So we have numbers, but we also have the stories behind that. And the two combined could be very powerful.
And Dr. Ellinger, anything to add? And then also just next steps now after the report, what's the action going to look like?
In terms of next steps, I don't want to leave this conversation without bringing up the whole inadequacies of the Indian Health Service that we heard over and over again. Yes, medical care is not the only thing that's really important. It's the community and living conditions, but we can't forget about the clinical care. And we heard over and over and over again in the stories that we heard that the Indian Health Service, for a whole multitude of reasons, is not meeting the needs of the American Indian Alaska Native community. And so we really need to double down on why is that happening and what can change to make the Indian Health Service or some other system meet the clinical needs, the medical care needs of the American Indian Alaska Native community. That's where a lot of our steps need to go. Change the narrative, collect our data, change our data collection, and improve the Indian Health Service. That would really be the trifecta for me.
Welcome back to our Line Opinion panel. Staffers at homeless shelters called 911 more than 1,100 times for help with runaways and children suffering from mental health crises during a recent 3.5-year period. Now, many of them were foster kids. We learned those numbers last week in a story from Ed Williams, published by Searchlight New Mexico and ProPublica. Now, the state has promised repeatedly that the Children, Youth, and Families Department would stop housing troubled kids in places that can't help them. We've covered that here at the table many times, except in extraordinary circumstances, according to them, but it's still happening anyway. Mr. Williams reveals that police are often left to pick up the pieces. The quotes he gathered from officers are striking. Many of them know they aren't equipped to help these kids either. And Tom, do you find it extraordinary to hear police themselves criticizing and questioning a system that continually brings kids back to these shelters? When you're hearing ground zero reports from police officers, that's got to wake some folks up, it would seem to me. How did you take what you saw?
There are a lot of items in the Searchlight story that definitely caught my attention. By means of disclosure, I've done work with CYFD on topics related to this, but these items, my thoughts are all my own.
Appreciate it.
And so, I think what Mr. Williams did was he brought to light items that need to, it's kind of like a shake me to wake me kind of thing.
Yes.
And yeah, that's definitely the negative side. It's not a highlight reel, not in the least, but it's something that it's one aspect that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
One of the underlying issues is really on the need for foster parents, resource parents, and really for New Mexico to get involved.
Yeah.
But when you look at that, it's very difficult. And for the normal New Mexican, I think we look at that and we're just shocked. It's like going, how can we treat others like this? But you know what? It's not an easy fix. It's CYFD is not Department of Tourism. It is not Economic Development Department. It is we have to have different expectations and of what success looks like.
That's a very good point. That last point there, just on Tom's point, Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office Lieutenant Amy Dudowitz, who you never read, quoted in an interview, quote, "It is a frustration and it is a huge concern for those of us that are answering those calls, like, is this the best response that we have to offer," end quote. And Michael, again, the frustration coming out of law enforcement people should be a signal, it would seem to me, to policymakers that we're just not doing enough here. How are you hearing what these law enforcement folks are saying?
Well, if law enforcement needs help, then something's really wrong.
Right.
I mean, and they're not the most appropriate to be addressing this issue.
Right.
What it points out to me is a failure of a system to really to address the issues of foster children.
That's right.
And again, I'm going to circle back to what I said earlier in our conversation, was that I would imagine that many of these children are coming from families that we would define as dysfunctional and having a host of issues. Some of those issues, I would imagine, are parents who are not functioning in their roles as positive support and parenting, and I would imagine many of them have been impacted by alcohol and substance abuse as well as drugs.
That's right.
And until we really go back to the origin of what is causing this problem that ripples across our systems, till we go to the basis of that and address that issue, we're going to continue to have this fallout.
That's right.
And nothing's going to change it.
Act like it's a fire department running around putting out fires. Exactly right. Tom mentioned some other things, Giovanna, that was in the article that I thought was interesting as well. Some of the police officers, they have to stay with kids for hours, unable to respond to other calls. You can't be having that. Is this a resource problem? Is that what's going on here?
So I think there are resource issues for sure, but I think what Michael said is really key, which is that it's a systems problem.
Right.
And so, and just disclosure as well, I've worked with CYFD regional managers in a different perspective from my work in supporting women and professionals in the workplace to manage their stress in the workplace. So, but all of my opinions are my own. And so I've seen it from that perspective. There's no question. I mean, the people that work in CYFD are caring people
Right.
who a lot of them have social work backgrounds. I mean, I think this blaming those CYFD people is the wrong answer, and it really is a systems issue, because if you have your leadership, which is the governor and the CYFD leadership that she put in place, who have all the right intentions and they understand the root causes and the social determinants of health and all of the things, and then you still see the police sitting with this teenager
Right.
who is bound by the feet
That's right.
and the hands, and it's horrifying.
With
and
a helmet on to
right,
keep the person
and
from
the
injuring
police
themselves.
are sitting there for hours. Clearly, there's a disconnect with the system,
Yeah.
and so I would look there for sure. And that's not an easy fix. Clearly.
Good point there. Another interesting point, guys. Attorney General Raul Torres wanted to create a new civil rights division to sue the state on behalf of children harmed by government neglect and incompetence. But the governor pocket vetoed a bill that would have made it happen. Tom, why do you think the governor was so bristled at the idea of additional oversight of CYFD? Or is the issue, as she hinted, perhaps it was better put in another already existing agency that we can manage the money and kind of get to something? But we have neither at this point. So.
Well, I think you have some other types of progress. With respect to the Attorney General, he was able to bring to light a conversation that there's a need for a civil rights division within his office. So that I think was a good positive move because it created awareness. Second, in the midst of the legislative session, the governor announced, in the midst of 30 different bills to reshape CYFD in some form or fashion, that CYFD is going to be going under her own microscope.
Right.
When you look at the origins of CYFD, you have to go back to 1991 and Alice King. And there were 5 different departments that all had different pieces of the child welfare reform. And so they brought all of those together, and each cabinet secretary has helped move the ball just a little bit further. We have Heather Wilson, who did it. You also have a Monique Jacobson, and now you have Judge Vigil. Everybody is moving that ball forward ever so slightly. And again, these are not, you can't make huge steps. These are all little baby steps that you have to make.
Michael, let me read you a quote here. A spokesperson for the governor on the Raul Torres idea said the bill would, quote, add barriers for child victims to access resources and create confusion among entities already doing this work, end quote. Do you buy that? Mr. Torres is trying to funnel this all into one place. Why would the issue be that it would be dispersed? It's interesting.
Well, unless there's something that's not stated, it would seem to me that anything you would do to centralize some sort of control or activity would be a step in the right direction. I think that this may be something that's too close to the governor on some level, and so that might be have something to do with why she's looking askance at it maybe.
Please, go
I
ahead.
would say that she probably wants the opportunity to address it within her reforms and things that she announced at CYFD, rather than giving it over to the Attorney General's office. Civil Rights Division idea that is a good idea and works in other states, but primary goal is to look at what the government is doing wrong. And I would think that the governor is probably thinking, well, let me try to do it first based on what I've said I want to do.
Right.
And also,
And she, interrupt for a quick second, Giovanna, the governor also said the AG already is empowered to take on these kinds of cases if he wants to. That's an important data point there.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, Gene. And I would say that was one of her main, points was that, look, you don't need legislation to do this work. You can go ahead and do it anyway. And it's also interesting that apparently there was no funding in the bill anyway.
Well,
so it's not like
that's our
he's
way.
missing any money. I know. It's not like he's going to be lacking the funds that he would have had to do it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Just a minute, just under a minute here, Tom. You mentioned interesting. Secretary Vigil took over in 2022 after Brian Blaylock resigned. Remember that, guys? We talked about that here. Following that transparency scandal where he asked all the COFD employees to communicate via an encrypted messaging app. But Ed Williams' story is just the latest in a series of exposed, failures at CYFD. Lots of them in the foster system. What stops this at the end of the day?
Define this, because I heard two or three different things.
That's so good. This being the overall CYFD, is it more leadership, more oversight, a total overhaul?
Well,
what should we be advocating for here?
I think the department is set up to advocate for kids.
Yeah.
And it's as Ed Williams's items, his story pointed out, there are a variety of different issues that need to be addressed in that process. The cooperation and integration with law enforcement, and is just one aspect of those.
Yeah, good points there. Thanks again to our line panel as always this week. Great stuff. Be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics the line covered on our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. And catch any episode you may have missed on the PBS app or your Roku or Smart TV. But first, a check-in with Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Bregman, who most of us know as a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer and a dad of a certain ball player and a Democratic Party leader, of course. The governor appointed him to the new position in January. New Mexico in Focus correspondent Russell Contreras caught up with Mr. Bregman to ask why he decided to switch sides in the courtroom. I want to hear that, and how he plans to address persistent high crime here in Albuquerque.
Sam Bregman, thank you for joining us here today. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
To start off with, you've had a successful career here in New Mexico as an attorney, former prosecutor. What in the world would drive you to take this department, take this position in a prosecutor's office, the biggest city in one of the poorest states in the country, a department that's had a lot of troubles through the years, to say, I want to take this? What's going through your mind?
Well, given this opportunity by the governor was a great honor. And I got to tell you, the reason I decided to do this was, number one, I love this community. I've raised a family in Albuquerque. I've been in the criminal justice system for 30 years as a lawyer. And this city has a crime problem. There's no doubt about that. That's plain and simple. And the idea that I could somehow make a difference and give back to my community for the wonderful opportunity I've had to raise my family here, and the fact that I love Albuquerque and I want to help. And that's really why I'm doing it.
Did you have any reservations? Because you were a successful defense attorney. You've gone against many prosecutors. I've seen it in action. That you're actually going to step over to the other side and start going after criminals. Was there anything in your mind saying, wait a minute, I have to change my mindset. Can I do this?
No, I have to tell you, my first real job as a lawyer was being an assistant district attorney in this very office many, many years ago. And I look back throughout my entire career, and that was probably my favorite job I ever had, because I felt like I could make a difference every day. And so I went off into private practice. I have had a successful career there. But this was an opportunity that I'm like, you know what, I know this criminal justice system. I know how we need to collaborate together as a community to change the crime situation in Albuquerque. So I'm all in.
Just a few years ago, we were at 30-year lows on crime. Like everyone else, we started upticking on violent crime and property crime. From your perspective, before you got in here, what did you think was driving the crime in this city?
Well, in the last few years, it's fentanyl, it's drugs, and it's unfortunate. We have also a huge gun violence problem. Guns are very accessible all over the country, and I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, but at the same time, we have people that have no business having guns. We have teens, we have juveniles driving around with guns, with these extended magazines with 50-round barrel or drum clips. It's terrible, but I think in large part it's fentanyl and it's drugs, and we've got to get a handle on that. That's the underlying reason, I believe.
No, there have been a lot of critics that say our bail system is also something that needs to be reformed. A few years ago, we were on the other way, where it was hard to get bail. You could go into jail for a small crime and not have the money to get bailed out. Now we've gone the other way, where some critics say we're releasing folks too. From your perspective, what is the problem now?
Well, let me just back up for a second. I agree with what you explained as the issue before, and that is that people were not getting out just because they didn't have the money for bond, and that's why I supported bail reform at the time. But common sense tells us that if someone, for example, and this is a recent case, if someone has been convicted of killing another human being and they have done their time but are now charged again with homicide, there is no way that person should be let out pre-trial. They should be detained until trial takes place. And I've got to tell you something. I was very much of an advocate for rebuttable presumption, what they call rebuttable presumption, that says basically that individual I just described, there should be a rebuttable presumption that it's not safe for the community to let him out while pending trial. And so we are working together. We'll continue to work together. We weren't successful in the legislature on rebuttable presumption, but that's okay. I'm not someone that's going to complain about the way things go. I want to look forward. And we are working with the judiciary, all the stakeholders in the judicial system, to make sure that this community is safe, because that's the number one priority, is that people are not only safe, but they have a perception that they are safe, because both those things are very important to have a livable community.
Now, some critics will say that proposal that was before the legislature, there was some constitutionality problems with that. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't, but it's okay. We have a lot of lawyers out there that have differences of opinions. That's why we have cases the way we do, and that's why those kind of issues go up to the Supreme Court. I would have liked to have seen that case be presented to our state Supreme Court to see. Listen, all I'm asking for is to do the same thing that the federal system does. The federal system has basically a rebuttable presumption. And let's be clear, in no way am I advocating changing the presumption of innocence all the way through a case. However, there is a time when you can look at someone's record and you can see their conduct and their newly charged conduct and realize there is no reasonable condition that we can let that person out where the community can be safe.
Now, you're in a unique position. You both defended officers and you both defended clients who were victims of civil rights violations by officers. So you're going in a unique position. Now that you're a DA and you're looking at the totality of where we are with our policing, is there still reforms that the police department needs in order to be safe, fighting crime, but also honoring civil rights and really monitoring its excessive force behavior?
You know, everybody's civil rights should be a paramount concern for everybody. And when I say that, it's very broad, but civil rights are something that I really hold dear to my heart. I have represented people who've had their civil rights violated, but I'll also say something right now about law enforcement. There is not a tougher job in this country than being a cop. It is so hard because what they have to deal with on the street, and then they're second guessed afterwards, right? They're second guessed both in a criminal case or whatever force they thought was needed to use at the time. So my hat's off to every law enforcement officer out there. And 99.9% of them, I think, do one amazing job with how tough that job is. At the same time, we've had DOJ in here over the last few years, and I think the police department has taken a lot of steps for the better. But at the same time, it's not something that I'm overly concerned with as far as a police department in whole. We always will have, in whatever industry we're in or whatever occupation we're in, we'll have some bad apples here and there. But overall, our police, every day we should be thanking them for what they do in this community.
So you don't believe there's a structural problem? You believe it's...
I don't believe there's a structural problem right now. No, I think we always need to be concerned. We give someone a badge and a gun, and with that comes huge responsibilities. But I believe for the vast majority of all police officers, they care about this community, they want to protect this community, and they're doing one hell of a hard job every single day.
Why did you only want to do this for 2 years? I know you didn't want to think about the politics of running for your re-election, but for you to implement some of the things you want, it's going to take someone to follow you after this to have that same, to buy in? Why would you only go into this 2 years?
Well, listen, I want to focus on doing the job. I think the best thing I can do is get up every morning as I am, energized because I love this job. Getting up, working with prosecutors, working with all law enforcement in a collaborative way, getting the DA's office working together with APD, with the Sheriff's Department, with state police, with all of our federal law enforcement officials, and with the U.S. Attorney's Office, for example, working together to grind it out and solve this crime problem. And I'm not focused on politics in the future. I'm focused on doing this job right now, the absolute best I can, and I'm trying to move the needle. And when I say move the needle, you're not going to stop crime tomorrow. But what we can do is put processes in place in this office and throughout the law enforcement community in Albuquerque to really start to try and get a handle on the gun violence, to get a handle on the fentanyl crisis, to make sure we don't have kids in schools with guns. Those kind of issues I really enjoy working on.
Now, everybody's going to have a report card after your 2 years about how Sam Bregman did, but how are you going to judge yourself after those 2 years?
You know, the job of a prosecutor is to do justice. And it's not to get so many convictions. It's not to handle so many cases. It's to do justice on every single case. And I believe my opportunity to teach young prosecutors as well as other prosecutors in that office what justice means. I will judge my success by how well our prosecutors are doing, not in convictions, but presenting a good case to a jury and letting them decide. I will judge, of course, it would be great if we saw some crime numbers go down. I anticipate we will. I anticipate that we are making a difference. We're going to go after these drug traffickers. We are going to be relentless in our pursuit of gun violence and making sure people are held accountable. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that the community recognizes that we are going to be insistent that people respect the rule of law. You don't like the law, you could go up to the legislature and change it, but whatever the rule of law is, we're going to make sure we hold people accountable for the rule of law.
You've been a prosecutor, you've been a city councilor. What would it take for you, after these 2 years are up, to consider running for an office like mayor?
You know what? We're gonna kind of dodge all the political questions in the end, and I appreciate the question. But what I'm going to focus on is telling you, I think the best thing I can do is just work my tail off every day on being a really good DA.
But I used to call you twice on 2 different cases. Your mind can handle 2 things at the same time.
Oh, I think I could handle it mentally, but it's not what I want to do. I want to focus right now on prosecuting.
So you're not thinking about higher office, mayor at all?
I'm not thinking about any of that stuff right now. I'm thinking, and my wife would probably kill me if I did start thinking about it.
If you made the announcement right now.
What announcement? Right? What are you talking about? I am focused on fighting crime. I really am, and that's what I want to do.
Sam Bregman, District Attorney here in Bernalillo County. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The Mountain West Conference isn't exactly home to basketball powerhouses. Just one school has gotten past the first round of the NCAA tournament since 2016, and no Mountain West team has come close to college basketball's promised land. But that changed last month when San Diego State University punched its ticket for the Final Four in Houston. Now, the Aztecs made it all the way to the championship game, of course, a spot our Lobos would die for. Despite the envy, the UNM Hoops program does stand to benefit from their conference rivals' success. This week, senior producer Lou DeVizio sat down with Albuquerque Journal sports writer Jeff Grammer to talk through the details and about his trip to cover the big dance.
Jeff Grammer, thanks for coming in. Great to see you.
Absolutely.
Sports writer at the Albuquerque Journal, specifically UNM basketball, for more than 10 years now. You were just named the 2023 Jim O'Connell Award winner. Yeah. Congratulations on that by the Basketball Writers Association.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now, you got to cover the Final Four this year. It's where you received the award. Had you been in the building for a Final Four or a tournament game before?
Yeah, this was the second Final Four I've been in. I've been to some NCAA tournaments covering both the UNM Lobos and the New Mexico State Aggies through the years, but always first weekend stuff, which is the most exciting weekend if you ask me, but it's not the same beast as maybe even a Sweet 16 round, which is the second week of the tournament, and it's nothing compared to the Final Four.
Now, obviously San Diego State was the star of the tournament this past year for the Mountain West also. How does that impact the legitimacy of the conference and UNM by extension?
Yeah, I mean, big time. The Mountain West overall, first of all, had a really good, solid regular season this year. And UNM was a big part of that. They were the last team undefeated in Division I basketball. There's 363 Division I teams. The last team in the country without a loss was the UNM Lobos. Stuff like that sort of adds to the perception and gets some attention. So UNM added to the Mountain West, kind of building some legitimacy in the regular season this year. They didn't finish as well as they'd like. They did get invited to the NIT, first postseason appearance for the Lobos of any kind since 2014. So they helped out, but if the Mountain West got into the NCAA tournament, they got 4 teams in this year. San Diego State obviously made the run to the national championship game, but they got 4 teams in last year, and all 4 teams lost. In fact, going into this year's tournament, the Mountain West had an 11-game losing streak in the Mountain West or in the NCAA tournament. They were starting to build a perception of they may be good in the regular season, but once they get into the NCAA tournament, they're not that good. And it was starting to really resonate with national media, fans around the country. And that's why I think San Diego State doing what they did this year in the NCAA tournament, not just getting there, but actually winning, getting to the Sweet 16 round was a big accomplishment for this league. They were the first Mountain West team ever to get to the Elite Eight. Then they were the first Mountain West team ever to get to the Final Four, hit a buzzer beater. Lamont Butler hit that buzzer beater in the Final Four. Is actually the same guy that hit a buzzer beater here in the pit earlier this year. And then they get to the national championship game. That run for San Diego State helped kind of make what the Mountain West had been doing for about 5 or 6 years, really, where they were getting multiple teams to the tournament but not winning. It kind of erased some of the doubt with all that. I talked to a lot of national writers in Houston about that, and I know one of them, Jeff Goodman, said they desperately needed this. I know Pat Forty from Sports Illustrated said, yeah, they needed to legitimize what they had been doing for so many years, and San Diego State did that this year. So how that helps UNM, maybe it helps a little in recruiting, maybe it helps with the TV contract for the whole league down the road, but ultimately I think it just helps with future NCAA tournaments, and maybe a team that's right on the cusp, do we let them in the tournament or not? Maybe it makes it a little easier for those teams to get in.
Sure. Now, in an article you wrote recently about kind of how this all helped shake out in the Mountain West, you mentioned money.
Yeah.
That's obviously a big factor in anything, but specifically in this one, a team goes that far. Where does that money go that San Diego State is bringing into the conference?
So obviously the financial component to this, there's a couple angles to what the financial component is. For San Diego State specifically, we've probably heard stories through the years when a team wins a national championship in football or makes a deep run in the tournament, their attendance goes up, not their attendance, their enrollment at the school, and the brand exposure for the university itself, all that helps finances. But real specifically, the NCAA tournament was purchased, the media rights to that was purchased by Turner CBS Sports years ago, and I think the current deal right now is like $10 billion. Regardless, it's multi-billions of dollars, which leads to, okay, the NCAA has all this money for the NCAA tournament. How do we disperse that money to our members, to our league members? And like I said, there's 363 Division I teams that the NCAA has to figure out how to disperse this money. You cut that up 11 ways. There's 11 full-time members in the Mountain West. That's good money for a school like New Mexico that now gets to count on its budget, which is about a $30 million athletics department budget. They get to count now for 6 more years on so many, several $100,000 extra each year. And there's schools that have a much lower athletic department budget than UNM does in the Mountain West. So this is real money. This really helps a school and a league like the Mountain West. Now, you look at a Pac-12, an SEC or an ACC conference, a Big Ten, they're getting 18, 19, 20, sometimes 30 units per year. They're in a different stratosphere in terms of the economics. But when you talk about how needed this run was for the Mountain West by San Diego State to get to the Final Four, it wasn't just about perception. It wasn't just about this national perception that they couldn't win in the tournament. It was about dollars and cents. They got a whole lot of money because of it.
So that money that comes to UNM, how is that used? Will we see an impact on the court itself in recruiting or somewhere else?
A lot of the basketball money goes into a pot for the whole athletic department. I know the basketball coaches and basketball fans would certainly like to see, if it's basketball money, go right back into basketball and invest in more recruiting, pay coaches and assistants more, whatever you can do to reinvest in basketball. It doesn't necessarily happen that way all the time, though.
In terms of exposure, San Diego State going on so far, will that affect how the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee considers Mountain West teams moving forward?
I think so. I think the answer is yes. Now, technically, they go year by year. They just look at the numbers. They have a model of many different computer systems that rank teams. They have the human element, the eye test, what a team looks like and how they're performing. All these computer models that are supposed to take all of that out of the equation. But the reality is, at the end of the day, there's a committee of conference commissioners, some athletic directors that sit in a room every year and decide, it's a 68-team tournament now, and there's 32 conferences. All 32 conferences get one automatic berth into the NCAA tournament. All the other ones are selected by the selection committee. So when they select which teams get the at-large berth into the NCAA tournament, there's a human element. And I don't think you can tell me that after, again, what was going into this year's NCAA tournament was an 11-game Mountain West losing streak. They hadn't won a game since 2018 in the tournament. I don't think that human element in that selection committee could ignore the fact that there started to be this building perception that the Mountain West, you put them in the tournament, but are they really succeeding? Are they doing well? Not really. So I think it was really important that San Diego State did what they did this year, because I think in the future that human element's probably not, when they're deciding which teams, the close teams, if there's a team in the Big Ten and there's a team in the Mountain West that they're deciding between, right now I would have told you before this year that Mountain West team, somewhere in the back of their mind, they might say, they never win in the tournament, let's go with this other team. Now I think that gets eliminated a little bit. So yeah, it helps.
The Lobos almost made it farther than they did. That buzzer-beating win for San Diego State in February.
They were actually pretty close to an NCAA tournament team themselves.
Yeah. Do you think if they would have pulled through in that San Diego State game that they could have made the tournament?
Yeah, probably. I do. Had they beat San Diego State again in the pit and they were up until the ball's in the air with time expiring, had they beat San Diego State again, been the only team to sweep San Diego State in the conference this year, yeah, I think that might have been enough to put them certainly on the bubble, on the cusp of getting in the tournament. But the Lobos certainly collapsed if you just look at wins and losses down the stretch, and making no excuses for them. They had way too many losses down the stretch. But they also had a buzzer beater loss to Nevada. Had they won that game, who've gotten an NCAA tournament, had they won that game, maybe we're having a different conversation about their postseason. Had they won a buzzer beater loss to San Diego State, might be a different conversation. They also had one at Nevada, double overtime loss with the controversial call. They had 3 losses down the stretch of the season that had they just got one, probably 2 of those, they're in the NCAA tournament themselves.
Really close this year. What do you think about the next couple of years? Is there a chance?
Yeah, there is. In fact, I think this week, as we record this, I think this week Lobo fans are probably going to start hearing some names committing to UNM in the transfer market. And the Lobos are hitting that transfer market really, really hard to get somebody who's already played at the college level. They've also done 2 really good years of getting incoming freshmen, so maybe they can build 2 or 3 years down the road. What they got last year included Donovan Dent, a freshman point guard who played this past year, is going to be really good down the stretch. If they can keep him, if some bigger schools don't come lure him out with NIL money. They have 2 guys coming in next year. One ended up being one of the best players in the state of Texas, Jaden Toppin. He's a 6'9" power forward. And then they got a 4-star guard coming from Arizona. His name is True Washington. They got some really good freshmen coming in, and they're going to add some instant starters in the transfer market that have started at some other schools across the country. And I think, the Lobos next year probably will be a preseason top 3 team in the Mountain West.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the viewers like you.